Welcome back to Sledgehammer Horror, guys. I am Ken Sledge, and let's talk horror. Now, today I am joined by the amazing duo of Dave and Crystal. How you guys doing this morning or this afternoon?
Great.
We're fine. Yeah, looking forward to it.
So this to me is so special. I've had the opportunity to work with Dave and Crystal on the House That Screams, a horror podcast. You guys have listened to it, and if you haven't, it's right down here in the description. So you need to now, because I've been so lucky to be a part of that podcast a couple times, and I'm so glad that we finally are able to make this happen. Now, before we get started, a little bit about Crystal first. She is a lover of horror movies from an early age, as well as, like I said, a member of the House That Screams podcast, where she enjoys discussing an array of horror-related topics with an awesome group of friends that have become family. And it's not always just about horror. I know it's the House That Screams, a horror podcast, but they also do amazing connections where we could talk about things like Salt Lake City punk and put that into a horror world. So before we get started with you, Dave, Crystal, how did you get started with the the House That Screams, a horror podcast?
I got started with the House That Screams podcast because I am Dave's girlfriend. And so he would record, we would watch the movies together as homework. And then he would record. And so it started out, I would be in the bedroom while he was recording, and then I moved to the couch and he was recording. And then I met everyone at Joe Bob's Jamboree last year. And so then just kind of got adopted as the kid's sister, like that Phoebe vibe from Monster Squad. So I'm kind of the kid's sister vibe.
Yeah.
And so I have just infiltrated onto the House That Screams podcast.
We got her, guys. She's in. She's been made.
Right.
Back down. She's infiltrated. And that's amazing, because when I've been on there, it's one of these things where obviously coming in later for me to be a guest on this podcast, I would have thought you were there since day one. I mean, the camaraderie's there. You're quick on everything. You're just as much of an impact on it as anybody else. So it's not like you're that third wheel that just kind of rolled along afterwards. When you are a guest on the podcast and you don't know any better, I genuinely would have guessed you were there right from the start. So I think that speaks to you and how great you are being on the podcast.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, no, I am totally like kid sister vibes. Mom said you had to make me part of your subscriptions type thing.
Well, like I said, you never miss a beat. And, meeting Candy first, I was very lucky to meet Candy. And she's introduced me to an array of amazing people that mean so much to me now, with you guys being on that list as well. So, Dave, I want to bounce over to you real quick. You've been a horror fan for as long as you can remember as well. Zombie films have always been your favorite, with the original 3 Romero Dead films are your go-to. So now that we know Crystal joined a little after you did, how did you get started with A House That Screams?
Well, I've known Candy, I think through Facebook. Actually, we met online somehow like 10 or 12 years ago. And we'd always stayed in touch. She, like, for a while, she was a Twitch streamer. She would stream like Call of Duty, and I followed her on that. We just sort of knew each other. And then she had always said she wanted to start a horror podcast, and then she did. And then at the end of, I think, their first season, she posted something. We became friends through our love of Mystery Science Theater 3000. I think that's where we met, probably was in the Facebook group for that. And she posted something in the group saying she was looking for guests to come on their horror podcast. This was I think the end of their first season. And I jumped right in there. I said, yes, please, can we do Dawn of the Dead? And she, was kind enough to let me come on. And so I did Dawn of the Dead as sort of a guest host. And after that, she said, hey, just keep coming back. So I guess I just I never left.
He keeps showing up and I'm with him.
Right.
It's amazing, because even when you are a guest on the podcast, like, you guys have a way of making everybody feel like they're a part of the family. Like, the minute you come on there, everybody's so talkative. Everybody wants to get their point across. Everybody's respectful, and everybody's so excited to meet the guest that's on there. I've been on podcasts where that's not the case. I've been on podcasts where I feel like, let's bring this person on and but it's not, I'm not enjoying this. I'm not doing this to get to know this person. I'm doing this to try to increase some numbers. I've never felt like that with you guys. When I come on the podcast, I genuinely get excited. You guys are absolutely one of my top 3 podcasts I've ever been on. I love every single one of you. I've gotten to know you guys really well, and I genuinely enjoy anytime I get to converse with anybody from the podcast. So having some of the other podcast members come on my first horror movie was amazing. And now I get to have you guys on as well. It's always nice to learn where horror started. So that's actually what I want to do here. And obviously, I have been known to be a gentleman. So we are going to go ladies first here. Crystal, and now I love this choice. Something I want to say off the rip. Horror is subjective. And this movie has scared this movie has scared more people than a lot of horror movies that I know. So let's go back to the past here for a minute. And Crystal, the first horror movie that you watched was
Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory.
I want to say right now, right off the rip, do I consider Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory a horror movie? Probably not. Do I consider Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory a scary movie? For fuck's sake, yes, I do. And what I wanted to say with this, Slugsworth could be one of the scariest villains I've ever seen in my entire life until you get to that end. When Charlie's running down that alley and he pops out like, well, hello there, Charlie. I wanted to congratulate you. I was like, whoa, little me was
Right.
like, fuck this, man, this guy's scary as hell. So that's awesome. I love the fact, never talked about that on this podcast before. We are almost episode 300. It's the first time I've got to touch on my man, Gene Wilder. So Dave, let's bounce over to you real quick. Let's go back to the past. Your first horror movie was?
Well, Dawn of the Dead is I can't remember what the very first horror movie I ever saw was, but Dawn of the Dead is the horror movie that cemented me as a horror movie fan. It just pushed all my buttons. Just everything about it. The whole shopping mall vibe, because when I was a kid, back in the 70s and early 80s, going to the mall was a big deal. We didn't have, I sound like an old man. We didn't have cars and TV and electricity back then, but
You had outhouses.
but yeah, back in the day. But we used to go into the mall was a big deal. So when that movie came, and what 15-year-old isn't at the mall thinking, wow, it'd be so cool to be able to just run around here, just freely. And then Dawn of the Dead came out, and it really cemented me. I can't remember if I saw Dawn of the Dead first or Night of the Living Dead first. Probably Dawn, because my sister snuck me in. When Dawn first came out, Romero refused to edit it down for a rating, so it had to be rated X back then. Movies that were unrated, not rated X, but unrated, and back then.
I think you downloaded the wrong version. If you got
movies
the
that right. Yeah, that's it. Well, I'll put that in my OnlyFans. But back then, movies that were released unrated had to be treated as pornography, so they could only be shown after midnight. And my sister Stacy, who's 3 years older than me, somehow snuck me in to a midnight showing of Dawn of the Dead because she knew how much I wanted to see it. And so that was my first experience with Dawn of the Dead. Although I have to say, the first time I saw it, I'm from New Jersey. We're just outside New York City. And very briefly, when Dawn came out, there was a couple of movie house owners, I think, who came up with an edited version because they wanted it to be able to be released before midnight.
Yeah.
And it was edited way down. I don't think it even exists anymore. I don't think you can find it. But for a very brief time, that was the version that was circulating if you went and saw it before midnight. And so my sister took me to see this, and I guess this was the version that we got. And I remember thinking after the movie, well, that wasn't so bad. I don't know what everyone's talking about. And then, I don't know, a couple of weeks or a couple of months later, I went and saw it again at a true midnight showing, and it was the true version. And then I was like, okay, now I know what everybody was talking, particularly that first bite, Miguelito taking the chunk out of his wife's neck. I was like, okay, now I know what everyone's talking about. So yeah, The Dawn of the Dead is pretty much ground zero for me as a horror fan.
Well, can I also just say that I think Stacy's awesome.
Oh, my sister? Yeah, if she's listening. Yeah, I've told Stacy that I talk about her a lot on the podcast because she really, movies, but even more she's 3 years older. So musically, she was a big influence on me because I used to sneak into her room when she wasn't around and listen to her LPs. I remember she liked shit like Judas Priest, British Steel, which is a great album, and the Silvers and Michael Jackson. So my earliest musical tastes were from her too. But if she ever caught me in her room listening to her LP, she would knock the shit out of me.
And see, I'm an older sister, so I completely get that.
You get the other side of it.
Yeah, I completely get the beating the shit out of it. But the only thing I ever took my sister to, because I'm 6 years older, I was forced to take my sister to the first Pokemon movie. And it was because my mom won like movie tickets to it. And my mom was like, I'm not fucking sitting through that. You're taking her. And I was like, oh God.
I'm on your mom's side there.
Yeah. I was like, oh God.
Listen,
But
you got to catch it
now
off. Okay.
Yeah, but now as far as like the sneaking in the room and taking, like, it wasn't LPs in my time, sweetheart, but it was CDs and stuff and cassettes. But
We listened
Cassette
to
tape.
those wax cylinders. Remember those? Yeah, we still listen to records on those. Those are really hard to.
I had a lot of 45s because I got handed them down from my mom and stuff. And that my first LP was Prince. But yeah, I didn't let my sister touch those. I kind of locked those in a lockbox.
Oh yeah, Stacey didn't like me messing around with this.
But yeah, she messed with my CD.
Remember those weird little discs you had to put in the middle of a 45 so you could listen to it on a full size record player? Remember
Record
those?
player.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh yeah,
Did
I still
did you
got one of
fuck
those
up
right
a lot
over
of
here,
them for
actually.
her?
I can't remember if I probably.
See,
I'm sure.
That's what siblings, like little siblings, do.
Yeah.
Like they kind of think they know how to run stuff, and then they fuck your
And
shit
mess
up.
everything up. But let's have her come on the show one time. Stacey. Yeah, but my sister was great. She's introduced me to a lot of cool stuff back in the day.
That's awesome. And it's cool that, you have that memory now. You'll always remember that this one was the one that she started, and look where it's got you now. So I want to bounce back to you here, Crystal, for a little bit. Do you remember about how old you were the first time you saw Willy Wonka and the Chocolate?
3. I was 3. My parents were young and dumb, and they thought that I would love this movie, and they didn't see anything wrong with it. And I think that's why it traumatized me the way that it did. And that's why it's a horror movie to me. So I put this in the same sense. I know Sean has been on the show before, and his first horror movie was Hellraiser. That was my first true horror movie. Right. And I love Hellraiser. It didn't scare me, and I was about 3 or 4. Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory, I was 3. Scared the shit out of me. Had nightmares for weeks. I do not chew bubble gum to this day. Just don't. I don't. Now I would be Augustus, and I would like fall into the trick of a chocolate river in a heartbeat. Yeah. But I'm not touching any bubble gum. Like, it's not happening.
Right. And we'll talk about that here in a second, because I want to go deep into that a little bit. But Sean, I want to ask you first. Do you remember which scene it was from Dawn of the Dead that affected you the most?
Well, the first real shock scene in it is when they're in the apartment building. Well, actually, the very first one is when Wooly, he's the cop, the SWAT guy who goes crazy and he starts shooting everybody. When he kicks open that door and he does the shotgun blast to the head of the mannequin. That's probably that's probably the scene where you go, okay, now I know what we're in for. And then a few minutes later, Miguelito comes out and takes that chunk out of his wife and/or girlfriend's neck, and then he gets her on the upper arm, and it's a really good looking effect. Even to this day, I remember my daughter Zoe wanting to watch this when she was 7 or 8 or however old, because she heard me talking about it, and she's like, well, I want to watch this movie. And I said, okay. I have to explain to her, okay, this is what you're going to see. None of it's real. It's all just, make believe. And then that scene with Miguelito taking the chunk out of his wife's neck, I'm thinking, oh my God, I am the worst father ever.
No,
letting her watch this. And she was like, oh my God, it's so cool. So yeah, that probably the shotgun blast to the mannequin's head is probably the first. That's the movie that's the scene in this movie that sets the tone. You know what you're in for. This is not going to be, delicate or subtle. Yeah, George Romero's not known for his subtlety.
Yeah, it's gritty and it's in your face.
Yeah,
and it's chunky.
And then they take the bite out of the neck, and as a nurse, all I can see is like ligaments and tendons, and then they try to get the jugular in that shot. They tried. It's a great
effect. I don't know what they used for the fake skin or whatever. It's a great effect.
Yeah.
And it's quite.
I can't argue. I've always been a big fan of Mr. Romero, and I love how all out he went with his political statements, and this consumerism with this movie too. It's amazing because, like you said, right off the rip, even with the little kids at the beginning, like shit's going down.
Oh, when at the airport, the two little kids who come running out. Yeah.
Yeah.
And Ken Foree, who played Peter, he says that scene really affected him, having to like pretend to shoot these little kids who I think they were Romero's niece and nephew. I think.
Yeah.
They were related to him in some way, but that scene is fairly. Yeah, you see a guy shoot two little kids. It's fairly. This is 1979, so it's like, okay, I'm in. I'm down.
Right.
Which is funny. I was looking up how I knew Ken Foree's voice last night, and I looked at Dave and I was like, oh my God, it connects now. My generation knows Ken Foree because he was on Kenan and Kel, and he was Kenan's dad. And I was like,
yep.
Oh my God, the amount of times I've watched Dawn of the Dead with Dave, it never connected. I was like, why do I know the voice? Why do I know the voice? And then it connected, and I'm like, all he needs to do is scream at Kel.
He's got a great voice. He does have a great voice. Very distinctive voice. Very deep. Yeah, his presence is very intense in these films. You ain't just down here by yourself, boy. That scene down in the laundry room when they first meet. Yeah, you ain't just down here by yourself. I love that he calls him boy. Because that was, it was the late 70s, there was still a lot of racial, not that there's not racial tension today, but that's Romero speaking. He's giving the black man the power in that scene.
Exactly.
He's taller than Roger. He points the gun at him and he calls him boy. And that's not by accident, I don't think.
No, I think he did that to Kel a couple of times.
That's George Romero.
Mm-hmm. Oh,
and then when they're in the helicopter, and she asks him, are you leaving any family behind? And he says some brothers, and she says, real brothers or street brothers? That's one of the truly groan-worthy moments. That's one of the moments in that film that doesn't age that well. It always makes me laugh. It's like she says, real brothers or street brothers? Like, oh God.
Yeah.
And then he says both, and he explains her like he has one brother who's a cop. No, one brother who's a football player, and the other brother's in jail because back in the 70s, that's the only three things a black man could be, right? A cop, a pro ball player, or in prison.
Or jail.
I think that's Romero. That's Romero.
Yeah. So what about you, Crystal? We know what scene affected Dave the most, but what would you say the scene was from Willy Wonka that affected you the most?
The scene from Willy Wonka that affected me the most was Violet Beauregard chewing gum and talking about her world record, that she's a world record holder for chewing gum, and she gets a hold of this product where she's chewing gum, and they go through this whole, it's supposed to be this 5 or 6 course meal. Yeah. And she's talking about, oh, it tastes like roast beef, and I taste the potatoes and the carrots. And then here comes dessert. It's the blueberry pie. And then she starts to turn blue and she swells up like a freaking blueberry. And that just traumatized me. Now, we talked in the House That Screams about Child's Play and about Little People and how I'm traumatized by that, but the Oompa Loompas didn't help. So every time they popped out, that kind of hurt me too. In my hometown, we did have a little person, and she had been burned in a fire. So she kind of looked like an Oompa Loompa, but also like Chucky from the first one after he hopped out of the fire and his face was a little red and his hair was singed.
Poor lady.
My parents were young. My mom had me right after she turned 16. My dad it was a month after he turned 20. And so my parents would threaten, like if I didn't behave, if we were out in public and we saw her, that they were going to give me to her. So, that's 80s parenting for you.
It's like mommy dearest shit.
Yeah, that is mommy dearest stuff.
No wire hangers.
No wire hangers. But, so it kind of set me up for, a little person kind of phobia thing. So, this orange face paint and stuff with the Oompa Loompas, all I can see is the little person that I know that is in our hometown of 10,000. I don't come from a big hometown. And so, that terrified me even more, that these Oompa Loompas are taking the children off screen. Now I know in the books, a lot more morbid things happen to these kids, but in the movie, you just see them carting Violet Beauregard. She just gets rolled off, and they're like,
Yeah.
we'll press her for you.
Right. We put her in the juice press or something, which is horrifying if you think about it.
Right. So when I see the meme of Gene Wilder and he's just like this, you know, I know it's from that scene, and I'm like, oh my freaking God. Like, no, like, please, y'all stop. But, you know, I know it's from that scene because he's like, oh, we'll take her down to the juicer. And I'm like,
right.
Oh my God, y'all.
Or the scene when the one with the golden goose, what's her name?
Oh yeah.
I can't think of her name.
It'll come to me.
It's not Violet. It's
the rotten egg.
Veruca
Salt. She goes down the chute, and he says it leads to the furnaces, and then Gene Wilder's like, yeah, but I think they only light that furnace every other day. So you've got a good sporting chance. He's telling the father, there's a 50% chance your daughter's going to be burned to death. You know, if that's not a horror movie, you know,
right?
And he's so nonchalant about it. Well, you've got a good sporting chance.
Yeah, maybe today's not the day that
she might be not burned to death. We'll go find it. We'll go find out.
But do you really want to save her?
Right. That's I think that's kind of like what Gene Wilder's vibe is. There's like, if she got burned up, would it be that
really
bad?
bother
would
you?
It be that bad?
But yeah,
he's more saying like, hey, you got a good sporting chance that she's done.
Right, maybe that's what he's saying there, right?
Right, and you can walk away. We'll act like we don't know where she went.
We've got insurance. I mean,
right? Like we'll write you a check and like she wandered off.
Crystal, which scene it was that affected you the most from Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory? But what would you say your favorite scene from the movie is?
Oh my God, I gotta pick a favorite. Maybe the favorite for me is probably where they open up and they get to eat everything at the beginning, where Gene Wilder sings and it's nice and you don't have hellacious shit happening yet.
Right.
It's still nice.
It's still nice. Augustus Gloop hasn't drowned in chocolate yet.
It all goes south on the boat ride. The boat ride scared me so bad as a kid. Like when the colors
and every other kid who ever saw that movie.
You know, as scared as I am and as traumatized as I am of the movie, the boat ride didn't bother me. The boat ride actually didn't bother me. Everything else that was happening to the kids did. And then, you know, like, I love like the Candyman song.
That is.
And I know that Sammy Davis Jr. wanted that role. And I now, like, I wish he would have had that role. Right. Like, you know, I think that would have had me more into the movie as a child. But, oh, like having to try to pick a favorite scene.
Sure.
It's hard when this movie, like, as far as like horror goes, this movie traumatized me. Like when I say I don't chew bubble gum, like I don't go near it. Like
Violet, you're turning violet, Violet.
Right. We're gonna have to take you to the press. And she's like, oh, it tastes like blueberries. And then she's like, what are y'all looking at? Like, you can't tell you're expanding 10 feet? Like, honey, come on now. Spit the gum out.
What's amazing about these is how polar opposite they are. Now, obviously, there's not really any death in Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory, but Dawn of the Dead, there's plenty. So
it's not subtle.
Right. So, Dave, what would you say your favorite death from Dawn of the Dead is?
Oh, well, my favorite like dead person would have to be Roger coming back to life, you know, as a zombie. I don't know if he's not killed in that scene, but he dies from being bitten. The makeup effects on his face, Scott Reiniger. The makeup effects on his face are so much better than most of the other makeup effects. And the look on his face, you know, he sits up and the sheet kind of falls from his face, and he's got that sort of blank, like he's because he's reborn as a zombie now, so he's kind of looking around, kind of like, all right, what's up? And he sees Peter, and he kind of zeroes in on me, and his face is just anger. That's probably the most terrifying scene in the whole film, because you see somebody sort of transform. You know, he dies, they put the sheet over it, and he comes back. That's a pretty terrifying scene. It shows you that the zombies aren't just hungry, but at least in his face, they're angry. You know, he looked really pissed off when he comes back.
I mean, me too. I'm finally able to take a nap, and now I got to come back to this shit.
Right, that's what he said. Right.
I died, and now I got to deal with you fuckers again.
Right.
Right.
So, we know about your guys' first horror movies and how they affected you. And now, since I have two of you here, this is a question I asked both of you. And now, since I do bounce back and forth, Dave, you're going to get to be a cheater, pumpkin eater, and dwell on this a little bit. While
excellent,
you got to give me an answer straight away. So we know what your first horror movie was, but now my little buddy Ghostface has a question for you. What's your favorite scary movie, Crystal? What is your favorite horror movie of all time?
My favorite scary movie of all time. It depends on who I'm talking to. So if it's an older audience or if it's a younger audience, so my favorite scary movie of all time, younger audience, is Saw. I love the psychological suspense of that movie. I love Tobin Bell in that movie, and I love that series. I will die on that hill. I will fight on that hill. I was a psych nurse for a long time. I could take your ass down.
It's true.
But if I'm talking to an older crowd, my favorite horror movie is Hellraiser. And if I could get Daddy Bradley to read me the phone book with Keith David and sing me to sleep, I would. But yeah, so Saw.
Demons to some, angels to others.
Demons to some, angels to others.
So
yeah,
exactly.
Yeah, we well on that, right? For a little bit, Dave. But Ghostface has here's the sequel for you, my friend. What's your favorite scary movie, Dave? What is your favorite?
I hate to take the low-hanging fruit, but Dawn of the Dead. If I have to pick one horror movie to watch from now until the end of time, it's going to be Dawn of the Dead. And it's there's a version on YouTube. I believe it's a fan edit. It's called the extended mall hours version, and it's got all of the different scenes, because this movie was released in several different forms. You know, Dario Argento put up, I guess he put up some of the money to make the film, and he agreed, and so he got the European release rights, and he edited it. So there's a European edit, there's an original US theatrical edit, and then someone on YouTube, I think it's a fan edit, it's called the extended mall hours version, and it's every single scene edited into the film, and it's like in 4K too. It's a beautiful edit. So that's my favorite. If I had to watch one horror movie over and over again, it would be Dawn of the Dead, the extended mall hours.
And he's not lying.
No, I'm not lying. I watch it like once a week. I need it like oxygen. Like once a week.
If you guys need to find that, you don't have to go far, because I have the link for that right down here in the description.
Yeah, it's on YouTube.
Checking that out.
And it's a beautiful version of the film too. It's a very high resolution version of it. Yeah.
And if we go too long without watching it, I'll be like, "Hey, Dave, I'm kind of in the mood to watch Dawn of the Dead," and
I fall deeper in love.
Aw,
right.
baby.
Yeah. So that's got to be
imagine the other 6 nights of the week. She's like, "I'm not in the mood." And he's like, "You're never in the mood for Dawn of the Dead anymore. What did Dawn of the Dead do?"
They're right.
What did it do to you?
But you know, I mean, Night of the Living Dead obviously is a classic. Also, Candy talked about that when she came on a little bit ago, right? Yeah, it's such a classic. But I would have to go with Dawn, only because I'm pretty sure I saw it before I saw Night. I think Dawn was my initial foray into George Romero, because Dawn was shown. I think it was VH1 showed it. It was like a Halloween special, and they showed it with an intro by George Romero. And I remember grabbing it on VHS. I snagged it on VHS, and I would watch that thing and rewind it and watch it and rewind it and watch it. But it's got to be Dawn of the Dead. It's perfect for me. It's perfect. Even its flaws are perfect.
That's House for me. House 1986.
Ding Dong, You're
Dead.
Yeah, I remember renting that. I remember when I was in the Air Force, I had this friend Mike, and that was our big weekend. We would rent movies, and House was always a heavy hitter. We would rent House a lot.
Great movie.
The makeup effects in that are pretty amazing. You know, the monster effects, really amazing.
Yeah.
The sequel, House 2,
It exists.
But the main bad guy in House is I can't think of the actor's name who played the bailiff in Night Court. Remember the TV show Night Court?
Oh my
Yeah.
God.
What was his name? That actor's name?
He's in
Richard
Scary
Mole.
Movie.
Oh yes. He was the zombie Vietnam. So yeah, great.
He's in
I do.
Scary Movie.
House does hold a special place in my heart.
See, I'm
Funny
not so much-
enough, Kane Hodder does all the stunts for Big Ben when
Yeah.
he's Big
In
Ben
Ha-
when he's
in-
zombified. Kane
in
Hodder
House?
does.
Yes.
Oh really? I did not know that.
Yep.
I love Kane Hodder. So I'm not so much a House fan, but I love House 2 because I love Gramps.
Sure.
I don't
Gramps
know
is
that I've
amazing.
ever seen House 2.
We had
good. To me personally, it'll never be House 1, but House 1 was my first horror movie, so it's kind of nostalgia. That's it for me. But
right.
House 2 is
Well,
good. It's
Did you
better
see it
than
in a
House
theater? Did you see it in a theater?
it was
Yeah, you rented
It was-
yeah.
released in 86. I was born in 86.
So you probably didn't see it in a theater then.
We had
You're like
had-
3 months old. Mom's holding you up. For
Right.
this. Look, son.
yeah, we had House 1 and 2 on VHS because my dad liked both of them, and my sister and I just gravitated toward House 2 because we found Gramps so funny. It reminded us of our great grandfather.
And
So-
that's even better when you can have that personal relationship with it. So I have one last question for the both of you. Crystal, I'm going to ask you first. What we're going to do is we're going to bounce back to Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory. And what we're going to do now is we're going to rank this on a skull count. Now, we're not ranking it on acting, production, quality, nothing like that. We're not being critics here. What we're doing, Crystal, is strictly ranking this movie on how much it affected you on first viewing. So 0 skulls being not effective, 5 being extremely effective. You can use half and quarter skulls anywhere in the middle. What would your ranking of Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory be for you?
This is totally 5 skulls out of 5 for me because this, like I said, I don't even chew bubble gum. So from 3 years old to now not chewing bubble gum, I mean that's got to say something. And then for Grandpa Joe, I have had a whole problem since I was little. Grandpa Joe not like helping the family for as long as he did, and then all of a sudden Charlie brings home a golden ticket. He's like, look, everybody, I can hop out of bed and I can walk.
Gets his dead ass up finally.
Right.
Yeah.
He's like, I'm deadbeat and I can
Looks
get
like
up.
it's time for me to hit the old dusty trail.
Yeah,
Where's
we
that
can go
chocolate?
to
And I'm surprised that none of the other old people in the bed said anything to him. They're like, okay with it. They're like, motherfucker, you could get up all this time?
But wait a minute, they didn't say anything. So could they get up too?
They're all faking
So
it.
are
Oh my
they
gosh,
all-
he got up.
Right. Or are they all
Yes,
right in the
do it.
system? So when the mom's leaving to work like 40 jobs, to make ends meet, are they all getting up and walking around the house together?
When she's not home.
Right.
Yeah,
and
they're
then
up
they all
walking
hop
around
back
like
up
the
in their
toys from
bed.
Toy Story, like that idiot.
Yeah, Andy's home.
Into the beds. Oh my God,
Right.
my legs don't work.
My legs don't work. My arms don't work. Somebody's got to feed me split pea soup.
Cabbage soup. Wasn't it cabbage
Right.
Yeah, I
soup?
think so. I think it was. I try to block this movie. Dave's got it
Same
playing.
question
by
for
the
you,
way.
Dave.
I'm sorry.
Back
Yes.
to the skull count. So, like I said, 0 skulls. We're going back to Dawn of the Dead. How it affected you on first viewing. No critic here. Not judging it like that, but how much it affected you. 0 skulls being the worst, 5 being the most effective, 0 not effective. You can use half and quarter skulls anywhere in the middle. What would your ranking of
30 seconds.
Dawn be?
Well, like I mentioned, the very first time I saw it, it was that edited version. So I came out of the theater actually kind of disappointed because this movie was, before I even had seen it, it was legend. We had,
Right.
friends would talk about it who had seen it. I was disappointed because it was that really briefly circulating edited version. And I was a little bummed out. And then the second time I saw it, I can't remember exactly how that came to pass if I went to the theater, but I remember the second time I saw it, realizing, okay, now I know why this movie had gotten so much people talking about it, and then it affected me. You know, I was blown away. I'd never seen gore. I'd never seen gore like that. You know, like we talked about the woolly shotgun blast to the head of that mannequin, and then the Miguelito, and I mean, and then towards the end, the guy in the blood pressure cuff. You know, I mean, I had never seen anything quite like that, and I was down. I was down for that shit.
And it's amazing because these horror movies make us who we are today. You know.
Oh, do that? Oh, that explains a lot about me, doesn't it?
Well, sorry. I do want to thank you guys again for coming on, and for people, we're at the end of the third act here, guys. The credits are about to roll, curtain's about to drop, but before it does, not only should you be checking out the podcast down here in the description, I also have their social media links down here in the description as well. So make sure you're giving them a follow. Now, guys, don't go anywhere. I got a couple more questions for you. Everybody else, as always, keep talking horror, stay what you are, and we'll see you guys soon.